Well, thank you very much to the Spectra team. I'm very excited to be here. I have a long history with India, both personally and professionally. So it's really a great pleasure to be able to address this group at this meeting, and particularly this year. Just to introduce myself quickly, my name is Sandra Stahl. I have been in public relations for well over 30 years. I am now, I'm a founding partner and managing director of a company called Jacob Stahl. We've been in business for, this is the 18th year of our business. I started at Reuter Finn in the mid 1980s, and last year, Reuter Finn acquired our company. So it's been very full circle for us. And so it's very exciting to have our own agency as part of something larger. So with that, let me begin the presentation. It's called Leading with Humanity: How to Rebuild Trust and Connection. And this is extremely important right now because leadership is really re-examining itself now. How can leaders support their organizations and their stakeholders during the year and a half that we've just been through? That is clearly not over. We're in a complicated time. The world's a complicated place. Some businesses are booming. Some of them are struggling. But the one thing that's constant, no matter what the circumstances are, is having leaders who really communicate the values of the company or the organization and have a strong connection with their stakeholders, whoever they are, employees or their customers. So while things have changed so much, some things we do know: that COVID-19 has been a massive humanitarian challenge. Yes, it's a medical challenge. Yes, it's a business challenge. But overall, it is a massive humanitarian issue. And next year will not be a return to business as usual. What else remains constant? Stakeholders, no matter who they are people. And public relations is and has always been about people. People are complicated, and people are emotional, and people look to other people for leadership. And it's just a really important time to remember that leaders and stakeholders are complicated and busy people. So what do these people, stakeholders, need from their leaders right now? They need bold moves. They need clear decisions. They need moral support. They need help being prepared for whatever may come next. And they need support in what is clearly a time of uncertainty. This is what people need from leaders right now. Above all, they want leaders they can trust to show up. What do I mean by that? They want stakeholders. Stakeholders don't want to just read about executives. They don't want to hear them spout numbers or earnings. They want to understand what they're thinking, how they live their lives. They want to understand more. They additionally want to see more aspects of leaders' lives. And that reminds them that leaders are also people just like them. They want leaders who have humanity and who have and demonstrate empathy. Empathy, what's new about empathy? Any reputation work, anybody who's looked at the Harvard Business Review in the last 25 years, empathy is a word we've all seen many, many, many times over the years, as have leaders. So yes, it's a common element in the philosophy of good leadership. It's always talked about as part of leader attributes, but it has never been at the top. It is never, in fact, so not at the top, it's actually been undervalued often. But that can't happen anymore because now it's a requirement of today's leader in order to develop the high level of trust, care, and the culture of acceptance that's needed for this time. And people are seeing that. Our 2021 Business Solver study found that 84% of CEOs and 70% of employees believe empathy drives better business outcomes. So not only is it important day to day in relationships, but it's also a critical part of a positive business outcome. So you might say, okay, we've talked about empathy for all these years. People want to know more about the lives of leaders. They want to know what they're thinking. And, it's not an unfair question to say why this intense desire, why this intense need to know leaders as people. And the reason is because we've just spent nearly 2 years in each other's living rooms. We've been in each other's homes. We've been in each other's bedrooms in some cases. We've seen families. We've seen pets. We've seen their plants. We have just lived a whole different experience worldwide on Zoom and other platforms that allow people to communicate and do their jobs. So what comes with that are really different expectations. And that translates to the leadership too. So what's the profile of an empathetic human leader for today's times? That's someone who transcends the podium of their position. Someone who's more than a name on a business card. Someone who demonstrates their own humanity. Someone who's a person of their word. So if you look around, right, in the last year, or in the last few years, really, there have been leaders who have demonstrated visible empathy. Whether or not they have been the leaders of everyone's dreams, whether they have been perfect leaders is not the issue at the moment. The issue at the moment is which leaders can you think of have visibly demonstrated empathy? Bill Clinton famously bit his lip whenever he wanted to convey care, concern, humanity. That lip biting was the optics. It really showed people, and they felt it, that he cared in that moment. The CEO of Pfizer, he has zoomed to the top of everybody's awareness over the last 2 years because of all the work on the COVID vaccine, and he often drew on his past. His parents were Holocaust survivors. He drew on that in his communications about what drives him, what drove his team, what helped him connect to what was needed at the time. His backstory of his family and the Holocaust is something that he brought to the table all the time. And finally, Barack Obama. A few years ago, there was a terrible tragedy in America. He went to the church, which was the site of this terrible, shooting, and he sang "Amazing Grace." He broke into song. That's a demonstration of empathy, of humanity. So again, I'm not here to, say that they are not flawed leaders who have been perfect in every way, but they have visibly demonstrated their empathy in their own ways, both visibly in song and in a backstory. But for me, when I'm working with my clients on a reputation program, on a way to build awareness of the leadership of any given company and any given leader, right? It doesn't always have to be the CEO. Sometimes it's the leader of a department, of R&D, of any group where there's a reputation project. I look to the leader that I know who I've known, in fact, for over 30 years. He's a very good friend who always inspires me, always. And that's a guy called Steve Golin. He is a producer. He started 2 companies, in one called Propaganda. The last one was called Anonymous Content. And how you may know him in the group is that he produced many of the movies that have, and TV shows that have made their way, and have gotten a lot of coverage in India. They were very successful. Some of the more recent ones are Spotlight, a movie called The Revenant. He did the True Detective series. He did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. These are movies and TV shows that he produced. He brought to the forefront. But his humanity, it is important to bring to this presentation, because he was so well respected for how he ran his business. So much so that the 5 core tenets are from what are widely known as the Golin rules are the following. He was very real. Be real all the time. Show yourself as someone who values talent, good ideas. His word, in his mind, was his most valued currency. He always put the team first. Always. Whenever he had someone, more important very important on the phone, money, a producer, a star, if there was someone in his company who needed his attention, a teammate, he would take that call first. He was a team first guy, and he had tremendous humility. He was never afraid to say what he didn't know. He was never afraid to say when he was uncomfortable. He was very open about sharing his life. He died a couple of years ago. He had from cancer. He had a difficult last few years, but he always went to work and he always shared what was going on with his life. But this was the way he lived and practiced his humanity in this very illustrious career. And what did it get him? What did this practice of regularly sharing who you are and what you're thinking and your humanity with his stakeholders? For one thing, he won an Oscar for Revenant. That was something just a few years ago. But he also had a loyal and ever-growing global employee team. Company studio stars always wanted to work with him. New talent wanted to grow with him. He won, not only the Oscar, but many other top awards. He always had good press coverage, and he always got the investment that he needed. Whenever he wanted investors or a partner, all these things that companies often look for. They look for partners. They look for recruitment. They want to attract top talent. All of these are translatable to almost any company or organization that you would work with or that you would know. The investor that bought a big portion of his company at the very end of his life was Laurene Jobs, the wife of Steve Jobs. So Steve was just able to accomplish very translatable achievements that anybody would want, any company would want, and it was always with this very open, human, empathetic manner. So now I want to offer you help, support. What role can communications play to help leaders, your clients, find and show themselves and their humanity? 4 steps to consider. You should help them share more of themselves, their interests, their hobbies, more publicly. You should help them shift their vernacular. There are words, phrases that really communicate empathy and humanity. I'll show you how to do that. You can help them use social platforms and technology to help leaders bring more of themselves to stakeholders. And you can help them show up. All this helps them show up when it matters. So step 1, or one of the earliest steps, is to build a case, build a business case for executives to share for the value of sharing more of themselves in communications. And show them examples of this that play in their media coverage, in their company or brand narratives. And I just put a few of them here on the side of this slide. These are headlines, stuff that you can easily find about the Pfizer CEO, about the Goldman Sachs CEO, about the CEO of Microsoft. And these are just examples. You can find any of these in your own markets, in your own world, in your own space, whatever space that you're working in for a client. For the vernacular part, what's so interesting about this in helping your clients shift their vernacular and find these words is that there's actually proof in science for the impact that empathetic and more human words makes in people's brains, in the stakeholders of people's brains. There's advances in neurobiology and psychology show with data and images how the brain responds to certain words and phrases and stories. And the goal is to get the dopamine flowing in the area of the brain known as the reward circuit. Having more human empathetic words triggers the reward circuit, and it inspires these stream of feelings like value, liking, and learning. And this is all borne out in science. So, I've worked in healthcare exclusively for the last 30 years. I've seen a lot of data, and I always respond to data. And that's why I was very excited to find this information and be able to offer it to you, that there's proof in the science. So to achieve that, I like to consider these 6 S's for the vernacular. And when you're writing or creating words, speeches, press releases, white papers, and anything that you would do for a client in helping them build their reputation and show themselves as human. So keep it simple, nothing new there. Try to find an element of surprise, a good kind of surprise, of course, but surprise. Find stirring words, words that stir positive emotions. There are some of these. Make it smart. Be social. Like, have in mind the human connection, that what we're trying to do is socialize our client here, our leader here, and be story driven. Storytelling is something that's in our blood as public relations communicators, public relations experts. So bring all the aspects of storytelling to the vernacular that you offer your clients, that you help them find in themselves, and that you can actually help deliver, in your own work. Finally, you can help them leverage available platforms. The technology we have now is all about sharing and communicating, and help executives better leverage their own LinkedIn profiles. There's an article section, there's a post section. These are all widely available, easily available at their fingertips, at yours. So help them better use those tools to develop their own following, to sort of show more of themselves there. And also use the company social media. Develop posts, focus on how they spend their time away from their office. We just did this for our client. We're helping a client launch a new podcast, and there were guests and the host, and we brought their backgrounds, their interests to the social media. So for one guest, she's a big reader, and we asked her, what are the top 3 books on your reading list this summer? And we posted it. Another fellow, what are the 3 podcasts you're listening to? Show me, tell us what you do in your spare time. And for the host, we said to him, what do you do? What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite activity? Where do you go on vacation? And it turns out he's a very big fisherman, and he knows the top 3 places he are his go-tos. And we released this. So these are easy ways on a platform, on a public platform like their own social, that you can use to offer some of what your leadership does, and how they can become more relatable. So I just want to leave you with 3 ideas. One here, the first is that companies, organizations, and their leadership can bring their humanity to the fore, and in so doing, build the trust and connection to their stakeholders. They have to remember their people speaking to people, and we're more than our jobs, and that's what leaders need to show. Communications plays a significant role in making that happen and achieving that objective. And as a counselor, a good place to start is considering your own North Star leader, and the powerful human traits that make them not only successful, but also inspire. It's always worked for me, and I would like to, offer the same to you. So thank you very much. I hope you find that inspiring yourselves, and I look forward to the questions.
Sandra, thank you for that. Great insights, and it was truly inspiring. I have a lot of questions, but I want to start with a question about you. You've been in this industry for about 30 years. You have advised a lot of companies and leaders, and you've seen the industry transform and evolve, and you've managed several crises in your experience, right? So I just want to understand, what is it different this time? How is it different this time?
Okay, well, I suppose I would want to answer that question in 2 ways. The first is, of course, in 30 years, and I obviously started when I was 10, as you can tell, right? A lot about how we do our job in PR has changed. I mean, over those years. Of course, when I first started, there was no internet, there was no live streaming, no 24/7, no real-time response, far less fragmentation in the media, no forum for anybody, and anyone and everyone to share their point of view, right? So all that, has changed, and all I help my clients do is access to information. If you're not in healthcare, it just needs to be equitable and human and fair, and we just need to remember that it's not, we're not only speaking we're just, when we're helping our leaders communicate, we need to make sure that we have accessible information, or accessible, product, if that's the case. So I just think about access all the time now, and so I think those are the 4 points I want to say that I think about a lot in as we move forward.
I agree with all of that, especially the emotion part, right? Bringing in emotion to your communication is so important, especially during times like these where everyone is working remotely, everyone is all alone, managing the whole crisis all by themselves, and being empathetic and emotional in your communication is so important during such times. You also spoke about decision making, right? Especially decision making in crisis, where it has to be clear and bold. I just want to understand if communicating a bold decision is a bigger challenge than making one. Do you really think leaders today are spending enough time thinking about how do you communicate a bold decision? I just want to hear your thoughts based on your experience and working with leaders, if there is enough attention being paid to communicating a bold decision.
Well, I mean, I'll say that few business leaders intend to communicate rashly or without thought or sufficient thought. So while a quick response is often needed, I mean, there are absolutely circumstances where you can't, you just don't have the leisure of time to turn over every stone, look at it from every angle. There's some situations where that's just impossible. But even so, I think most leaders really take the care and have a great deal of consideration about making decisions. And I would like to think that communicators have a seat at the table and when it comes to figuring out the best means, the best platforms, the best words to get the message out there to whoever the stakeholder is. I mean, I would like to think that. That said, there are some communicators, so there's some business leaders who are big personalities, you know, Elon Musk, Richard Branson. These guys come to mind immediately who speak, you know, who seem to speak on the fly, who communicate off the hip, you know. And like Mukesh Ambani, for example, in India, you know, has that kind of status. You know, he's a player. He's that kind of personality. And one thing I read about Mr. Ambani is that he did his undergraduate studies at St. Xavier's in Mumbai, where I taught last year. I was a guest lecturer last year, so I sort of had this feeling for St. Xavier's and Mr. Ambani as a result. But in any case, is communicating a bold decision more challenging now? You know, yes and no, right? Yes and no. In the old days, we needed the media to be the sort of intermediary, right? We can only communicate with through the media, and this was not paid advertising. This was communications, and so we had this intermediary of the media, less control. But now, in today's times, we have all control. That's what social media is all about. That's what LinkedIn and company websites are all about. A company has 100% control now of how and what it communicates. They can post anything, and often do, on their website. Microsoft CEO famously posts the speeches and the talks that he gives to his employees on the website. Do they give enough time? You know, do they spend enough time? I would like to think they do, and I would like to think that communications has a seat at that table. And I would also like to think that because we have so much more control now, we're more effective. We can be more effective, and so in being more effective and having the control, we can show more of ourselves, tap into that emotion, and do it safely.
Thank you for that, Sandra. And also you spoke about bringing in emotion to communication, especially when you're making a bold decision, and you highlighted empathy has a key criteria for building trust and connection. But all of that doesn't come naturally to many people. A lot of communication professionals work with leaders who are brilliant at their job, right? They're really, really good at what they do, but may not be very empathetic or sensitive. And when you force empathy on them, you risk sounding fake, right? So what advice do you have for communication professionals on how do we balance that? You know, how do we stay authentic to the leader while being empathetic?
Well, you're right, because there's nothing worse than fake empathy. Nothing. It's so transparent. It's awful, and it's actually very hard to recover from. So if a leader for whom empathy does not come naturally is sort of forced into making a speech or give a talk or be publicly fake and empathetic, it's really the worst. But to mitigate that, right? To know who you're dealing with and to help them, really. It's to help them realize that everybody is human, including them. You know, they're human. They have families. They have hobbies. They have experiences. They have motivations. You know, part of being a PR person, right? Part of being a PR counselor, you have to wear a lot of hats. You know, you always have to wear a lot of hats. And one hat that we wear often is as this kind of a professional that can draw out this, you know, from our leaders, from our clients, you know, what it is about them that's special, what it is about them that drives their ambition, that drives their objectives, that drives their humanity, right? And so, when we have a leader who's just a different kind of person, for whom this doesn't come naturally, you have to put on, that hat. And ask them, engage them about their hobbies, their experiences, their motivations, what drives them, because all this is so powerful in helping them convey the humanity. So you're not just putting words in their mouths. You're just not writing beautiful words that spark the dopamine, in the stakeholders' heads. That's like, we're just not writing stuff for them to say. They're not robots, neither are we. And so they need to give you the time, or they need to give you exposure to the people who can communicate this about them, so that you can tease out this kind of information. And then once you have that, right? Once you have that, you can bring it back to them in a way. We can use their own words in a way to help them find the stories that will reveal themselves in the business communications in the right way, and that will be truly authentic, and so it's not only the stories, it's not only the words, it's also, you have to choose the platforms that are right for them, right? So you're not going to have somebody do maybe they don't do a live LinkedIn event. Like, maybe that's not the forum. You just sort of gradually get them to introduce their humanity in a way that they can feel comfortable, and help them tell the stories that will bring the side of their personalities. So, I think there are people for whom empathy and this kind of human softness doesn't come naturally. They're just different. They have different skill sets, but it's in there. It's in there, and bringing it out doesn't make what they are effective at any less effective. That's the part that you have to communicate as a counselor, is telling the backstory, or telling what inspired you, or in healthcare, for example, with leaders that we work with, a lot of them are former doctors. A lot of them have been in the medical field as professionals, and there's not one doctor who's worked in, say, oncology in the past who hasn't had an experience, a patient experience that changed their lives, that changed their thinking, that made them who they are today, either the doctor or the executive, right? And so finding that story, what is it? What happened? Tell me about, the patients you've treated, the families that you've met, the colleagues that you've had. There's nothing, there's something in everybody's background that is very inspirational, and reveals themselves in a way that can only complement positively those business successes, those attributes of themselves that make them so successful in business. So there are so many stories that are available to show as case studies, so many. So if you have a difficult conversation with a client who says, this is not who I am, I'm not sharing this, if you can show them the case studies, examples of people who have done this successfully, and how it enhanced their reputation, enhanced their ability to connect. That's one very successful way that we've done this. Is, let me just show you. Let me tell you another story, somebody else's story, and more than somebody else's story, and hopefully you can find somebody who they admire. Who do you admire in business? Who do you admire in this space? Who do you admire as a leader? And then if you can find who they admire, and then show them how that individual has brought their humanity to the fore, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially after considering what has happened in the last 18 months or so, like you said, empathy was deep down somewhere. A lot of leaders are making a very good effort in bringing that out. A lot of leaders have changed the way they communicate, not just on social media, but also within the team, in closed rooms. So I've seen that happen. So you're right, it's somewhere there. You just have to bring it out. But and I also like the fact that you spoke about how communications can help leaders find and show themselves, right? But that comes with a certain amount of risk, right? For example, let's say we have a leader like Steve Gollan within a company. What happens when they quit? You have invested all your energy in building a persona for this person, and then they decide to move on to a different opportunity. So how do we hedge against that risk? What's your advice there?
I mean, this is a very important word that I use. I never say leader. It's always leaders, right? So we never spend all our energy on just the CEO, right? I mean, the CEO is surrounded by other leaders in the C-suite, in the company, who are very important. And so when you are developing a reputation program, it can never be concentrated in one person ever. You always have to work with others, with who else. But I don't want to call them the bench, but it's always who is surrounding the CEO, who else is in the C-suite. So it's never captured in just one person. It should never. I mean, because that is a risk. So your job is to help a leader communicate the values of the way he, she, they lead, but it always has to be the values in the end of the company. So it's not I'm such a great guy, I'm such a wonderful woman, or anything else. It's about these are the values that I bring my company forward. So it's all roads should lead back to the brands. All leads should go back to the company, and the leaders that you work with, are the emissaries really of that. And so bringing more of themselves is really supposed to be the halo effect on the company. So that way, if people move on all the time, all the equity that you've built doesn't go with that person. The equity you've built attributes to the company. Okay. So it's something that it's what we always have in mind, and the reason that our executive leadership work is never just in one person.
But that also means that, so when you work with multiple leaders, when you are comprehensive in your approach, right? Do you think when we are comprehensive in our strategy, we will lose out on being impactful?
Oh, well, I mean, we're not comprehensive in a way that's we're like a mile long and an inch deep. It's not that kind of comprehensive. It's that when we're, for example, working on a company's R&D profile, and we're working with the leadership, like 4 or 5 people, right? So it's not 10 people, 12 people, it's 4 or 5. Sometimes it's only 2 or 3. So you have to pick a number, of people that make and of messages that make sense, that are most important. So you can't. I agree. There's a big risk in going so wide that you dilute your own message. So you don't do that. You pick your world. You structure it really clearly. Who are you working with? Whose voices need to be heard? How can that reflect well on the values of our company? And that's how you build. That's how you build the program. And that's the way you mitigate the risk of losing the equity when one individual leaves. And that's how you mitigate the risk of being so broad that you've diluted, your own work.
Okay. And you spoke about leaders showing up for key issues, and I think it's relatively easy for an individual or a leader to show up and speak up on a particular issue, but when it's a business and everything that we do has comms is aligned or should be aligned with helping the business, it becomes a little more difficult to show up speak out on key issues. So in your experience, what are those things that we need to keep in mind while picking a topic to speak on, or supporting a cause? Because we're such a connected world, right? A topic that might resonate well in a particular geography may not be, might be seen in a different light in a different geography. So, what are those things that we need to keep in mind while suggesting or picking up a topic to speak up on?
Well, I mean, there's a really easy answer to that, really, because when you're picking a topic, it can never be opportunistic. It has to be genuine. It has to be reflected in the company's values in the past, or it has to be a consistent effort to make those values something that you're going to put forward in the future. So many companies jump on various hot topics, like hot bandwagons, when they're in the news, and often it's opportunistic. It's just like a one shot, like, we are behind you, we support you, we believe, kind of thing. And when it's like a little band-aid, when it's something that you want to get out there because you feel like you have to for one reason or another, but it's not authentic to the company, and you've made no changes in the company to reflect that belief, then it's opportunistic, it's transparent, it's not good, and we've seen this over and over again. We saw it a lot in the last year. So in picking an issue, it has to be something that really reflects the values of the company and the values of the leader. And if it means making a change to the company, then there has to be a real intention, and it has to be sustained. So, there's a lot, a word that gets talked about a lot in communications and is purpose, right? Is what's the purpose? So, like, purpose communications is sort of what we're talking about, or showing up with purpose, or showing up on an issue. And, purpose is really only meaningful when it is like true to the intentions and the values of the individuals in the company, and then it is sustainably demonstrated both inside and out. So you cannot, the worst thing to do is hitch your star to some cause, that the company has, no intention of sustaining. And especially if it's one person's cause, and then that person leaves, and then the whole thing, dies on the vine. It has to be, you have to dig deep sometimes, but you need to show up you need to show up and make it authentic, and have it really be authentic, and then show sustainable work against that. And that's the only way showing up means anything.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I think this is great. It was really nice talking to you, and I hope to see you in person in India soon. And I hope we get to meet and do this again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope to see you.